Good morning, how are you? Well, today I'd like to say hands off. So what do I mean by that? If you just excuse me, I'm just going to move the camera down a bit. Well, that wasn't a success, was it? Anyway, I just wanted to say about hands off. I should have kept hands off the camera there, shouldn't I? Doing it again now. I'm talking about when you get involved in something that's going on for somebody else. So this could be your partner, your child, a sibling, a parent, anybody in your life, and you're getting involved in their business. Innocently, I understand, but you're getting involved. Now you see, when we do that, we're seeing whatever that they're coming to us and talking about as a problem, aren't we? We're saying this is something that needs to be solved. This is a real thing. And then we're diving in there with them, and then we're really making the issue an issue. Instead of seeing that whatever's going on is a symptom of the person's thinking. Now, you see, when people say, oh, well, you know, I know how you feel. Well, they can't, can they? It's impossible. Nobody can really know how somebody else feels. All they can know is how they would feel in the same situation. So we're only ever seeing what somebody else feels is a problem from our own perspective, aren't we? So if somebody comes to you and tells you about a problem they have, we immediately, unconsciously, in a nanosecond, go into thinking about how we would feel if we were them. What would we do? And then it's really possible for people to then give advice from that place. But actually, it's nothing to do with the other person. And actually, it's not even a problem. It's the way they're thinking about something. No, I know we all say we have problems in our lives, and people do have situations they need to deal with. But when we act as if the thing is happening, it's a concrete thing that's happening and it's in front of you, it's really difficult to allow that person to get new perspective on it. And I found in 2011, when the Japanese tsunami struck, I spoke to a mentor of mine and I asked him, you know, what would I do? How would I work with somebody that had lost everything? You know, their home, but their family. And he said, what you wouldn't do is imagine how you would feel. And that piece of advice has been invaluable to me, not only in my personal life, because I find now that when somebody I care about comes to me and they talk about a problem, instead of me getting in there and dissecting it and trying to help and do my thing, I actually am able to sit back and let them talk about it and just listen. And it's the same with my clients, isn't it? I can't help clients if I'm jumping into their problem. And I've had clients come to me with some awful situations they've been through. You know, I've had clients come to me, their partner's committed suicide and they've found them, or they've been raped. You know, things that are real, you would say. Now, if I go into how I would feel in their place, I can't help them because I'm jumping into that pool of misery with them. And there's no point in both of us splashing around there because we can't get out. And you must have heard that saying, all boats rise with the tide. Well, if I allow them, if I'm quiet and I allow them to see the problem differently, to see how they could look at the situation differently and to see that it isn't happening right now, then I'm allowing them to rise up to where I am, rather than me jumping down to where they are. Yeah. So my job is to help clients to see where their experience is coming from. And if it's something dreadful like a partner committing suicide, their experience in this moment when they're sitting in front of me in the room isn't coming from that awful thing happening. It's coming from their constant thinking about the awful thing happening, their constant questioning of themselves and why it happened and what they could have done, and on and on and on and on, and adding and adding and adding to the thoughts until they're completely exhausted with their own thinking. Now, if they keep thinking about something that isn't happening in front of them, I can gently point out that right now it isn't happening, and they are able to let go of thinking about the same thing all the time, because sometimes people, they feel that they shouldn't let go of something if it's something awful that's happened, because that's been irresponsible. Now, if I jump in with them and keep talking about the thing that's happened, I'm reinforcing the idea that it's something they really should keep thinking about, that it should go on and on and on forever. Whereas if I'm able to take a mental step back from them, then I'm able to help them to see that they are always going to think about it. But just like a book on the shelf, it's always going to be there, but they don't have to have that book open in front of them all the time. And that's what I mean by hands off. Now, sometimes people say, oh, well, you know, if I'm hands off with the people around me, that must mean that I'm going to be uncaring, I'm unfeeling. Well, actually, I think it's the opposite. I think when you're hands off with somebody, you can just love them. And that's whether it's a family member, a friend, or a client. You can just be there in love with them, in that space of love, rather than in that space of judgment or trying to solve something and all the things that go along with that. Now, just imagine if you had a 6-year-old son or daughter and he or she came home from school and said, oh, it's not fair, somebody's stolen my best friend off of me, because that happens, doesn't it? Now, you might get very practical and you might decide to invite the stolen friend over for a play date to see if you can get them back again. Or you might very sensibly just show your son or daughter lots of love and give them a cuddle and trust that by tomorrow the situation could be different again. But how about if your 16-year-old comes home and they've broken up with their first boyfriend, let's say, or girlfriend, and they're abject misery. This is the worst thing that ever happens. And you know, I have clients coming to me at 16, and I also have clients coming to me in their 70s who have broken up with somebody and say, I'll never meet somebody again. It seems to be a universal thought that we imagine this one is the end. There's never ever going to be anyone else for us. But if your 16-year-old comes home and they're upset about the breakup, now it's exactly the same as the 6-year-old, but actually you might get into different thinking about the 16-year-old's breakup, because again, innocently, you might go back to a time in your past that you were dumped, or that you dumped somebody, and that's the thinking you'll start having. Even if you're not aware of it, it's bound to come up. Now then, if you start to try and help your son or your daughter from that place, it ain't gonna help. The best thing would be to again, like the 6-year-old, give them a cuddle, show them lots of love, and listen, because they probably want to get a lot of things off of their chest. They don't need you to give them advice, unless of course they ask for advice about something. But they don't need you to chip in. They just need to be heard and to be allowed to get over it. And it will be much easier for them to get over it if you allow them to rise up to where you are, again, rather than jumping into where they are. So this is again what I mean by hands off, going back to neutral, realising that it doesn't matter how much you love the person, it's not your business. And it came to mind recently, a seminar I was on years ago, and somebody stood up in the seminar, a lady stood up and she said, I get all this about thought, but she said, my daughter just won't knuckle down. She's 11, and she said, when I was 11, I was like the perfect student, because I really wanted to get good grades, and I used to worry about exams, so I'd really study if I had a test, and I was a really good student, and my daughter isn't. She said, it doesn't matter what I do, I can't make her sit and revise for a test. And my mentor said, and what's that got to do with you? And the woman said, what? And she said, what's that got to do with you? And the woman said, well, it's my daughter. If she doesn't study for her tests, she might fail. And the lady who had been around the principals for many, many years, the lady at the front of the room, just said, and what's that got to do with you? And the woman was like, what do you mean? If she failed, and then the more she thought about it, she could see that it was her own worries about her daughter's not passing the test. Because if her daughter didn't pass the test, well, she might learn she needs to study again next time. But this lady was going into a lot of thinking about how she would feel if she'd failed the test, how she would feel if her friends all passed the test and she didn't. But it wasn't her business. Hands off. And actually the woman could see this and was able to relax into it, and she said, well, I'll just let my daughter find her own way. I'll provide everything that's necessary and let her go her own way. And that's what I'm talking about, being hands off. I'm not talking about not caring. I'm not talking about not having feeling towards somebody else. I'm talking about just recognizing that whatever is going on for somebody else, it's not your business, and you can be hands off. So I hope that makes sense to you, and I hope you have a lovely week, and I shall see you next week. Okay, bye bye.